Hey everyone, Scott here to discuss Impostor, starring Gary Sinise, Madeline Stowe, Vincent D'Onofrio, Tony Shalhoub, Tim Guinea, and Mekhi Phifer, directed by Gary Fleder. Now, I've never seen this movie before. I've heard a little bit about it, but I've never seen it for the life of me. So let's just get straight into this movie. In 2050, Earth loses the uncovered cities and democracy as they lose peace and they're being taken over by replicants, which sounds a hell of a lot like Blade Runner. And Spencer Olam, played by Gary Sinise, is married to Maya, played by Madeline Stowe, who's a doctor and live a happy life and builds weapons for a life of living. And Gary Sinise, I don't see enough of after this movie. Forrest Gump, which I have yet to review, like I've seen him in, and Apollo 13, which is one I reviewed him in, as he was the voice of the Smithsonian narrator from Captain America the Winter Soldier, another movie in which I reviewed him as he was briefly in. But he's a good enough actor to pull off a main character, but he doesn't excite me on the run as Spencer. But unfortunately, he doesn't excite me as the rest of the cast in this movie doesn't. And why are they going for replicants again? Is this a Blade Runner sequel? What the hell is this? He goes to work at his making company and meets up with Nelson Gittes, played by Tony Shalhoub, who is a decent actor as he's barely in the movie. And as they go to work, they meet Major Hathaway, played by Vincent D'Onofrio, who sort of excites me, but not really, in the Daredevil Netflix series. But so far for this entire cast doesn't excite me as their characters are not as interesting. Hathaway is led to believe Spencer is a replicant, as when he shakes his hand, and by he I mean Hathaway shaking Spencer's hand, he poisons Spencer briefly, and he reacts rather quickly. And is making any sense? Is this making any sense? No, not really, as this is a setup of the protagonist kind of movie, as Minority Report, which I already reviewed, did it better than this movie. And that'll be the next year, as it was Steven Spielberg. And here, who the hell is Gary Fleder? As he does movies I don't really care for, like the Michael Douglas film Don't Say a Word, Runaway Jury, and Homefront with Jason Statham. As he does special effects, as he doesn't do special effects very well, because these special effects are dreadful. But Screamers was done much worse than this, so I'll give the movie that. Nelson betrays Spencer as Hathaway experiments on Spencer, and Gary Sinise is acting pretty damn over the top as he comes down from 10, and I didn't know what that was all about. And Hathaway shoots one of his own men, as it makes me think he's not that great of a villain, as he has done better movies with villain work, like the Daredevil Netflix series, and his arc, I felt, didn't make it much sense. As he escapes, Spencer shoots a few men, and looks like What Have I Done, as Nelson gets killed, like Arnold Schwarzenegger did in the original Total Recall, as Arnold can't believe he killed a coworker and has the skills of an assassin. Spencer calls Maya, as they tell each other they'll find each other, and I've seen that before in other movies. And some do it well, and some do not, and this is one of the ones that does not, as this plot is absolutely tedious. And I couldn't well, let's talk about that in the next segment. Spencer is on the run while Hathaway is on a call with the Secretary of State, and this movie says the F word more than twice, as this movie is a PG-13 rating, and I heard that word at least 3 times for this whole movie, maybe a little bit more, and that bothered me so bad. Spencer hides in a building from the government, and the movie looks dreadful as it was released in 2001, and there are other movies that look a lot better than this for 2001, as Hathaway and the government look for Spencer, but they find a little girl on the roof and bring her down, while Spencer is found by some men and led by Cole, played by Mekhi Phifer, as his best performance was in 8 Mile, and I'm not a fan of his in general, and like this entire cast, he doesn't excite me either. And the movie is slowing down quite a bit as the problem becomes I don't really care for what happens in this movie, as I don't care for any of the characters. Spencer trades for his life for drugs at the hospital, and by he I mean Kale. And is that enough for me to keep him alive? No, because this movie makes bad choices from here on out. For example, they hit Kale with a piece of metal, some goons I mean, and three goons come in to fight both Spencer and Kale, and as one gets shot and the rest runs off because one is dead, and Spencer tells Kale Hathaway thinks Spencer has a heart of a bomb and wants to blow up the Chancellor, which doesn't sound believable. Because how can you have a bomb as a heart? Which doesn't make any sense, as the choices are again questionable. Spencer grabs a gun from Kale and disguises himself in case something goes wrong and bumps into Hathaway, and Kale catches up with Spencer, and they go in a building, as this movie does a very poor job at telling us where the place is at. It does tell, but not that clearly, in my opinion. Cole pushes Spencer in the hospital bed as Spencer tries to get proof that he's not a replicant, while Hathaway realizes Spencer bumped into him earlier, and he's doing all this useless running around and tries to find Spencer from there, as Spencer gives Kale the drugs he needs and witnesses he's innocent, while Hathaway is pissed they're running in circles, and all this running around, man, my goodness, and grabs Maya to question her, and a lady from the hospital asks Kale to call security, and both Spencer and Kale beat the living crap out of the security, and Kale gets stabbed in the stomach while he walks out alive, and Spencer escapes, and Hathaway works with some rather terrible people, as some lieutenant shoots a couple of doctors or hospital workers, and Hathaway sees Spencer's holograph as he learns he's innocent, which sort of makes sense, but at the same time, not really. Spencer calls Maya and tells her to meet her at the place where they met, and Spencer, which was at a theme park, and as he tells her he's innocent, and Hathaway and this team comes in and tells Spencer he's innocent, and tells him it was Maya who was the replicant and killed his wife, and they shoot her down and find Spencer's also dead, and the replicant that was Spencer blew everyone up, as that was the end. Which, like, what the hell is that? Which felt like a betrayal, and it made me think, what the hell kind of a climax is that? Now it's time for the rating. I'll give this movie a 3.1 out of 10. The movie moves rather slowly, as I don't care for any of the characters in this movie, as the cast doesn't excite me either. The special effects are not looking great, nor do they look good, as it does a poor job telling us where everyone is at, and it does tell us, but not enough to know what the city this is. The choices being made in this movie are questionable, like using the F word rather quite a few times, as the movie is terribly made, and the movie at the end of the day is pretty bad, and I don't know what kind of climax that was at the end, and none of this movie made sense to me. So I'd like to thank you guys for joining me, and I will be back with not Minority Report, because I already did that show, but I'm going to be back with Paycheck with Ben Affleck. And until then, just to Mars.